It was a bright, crisp morning when the billionaire decided to take a short walk in the nearby park, something he rarely did because of his busy schedule filled with meetings, calls, and endless responsibilities. The sun was just rising, casting a warm golden light over the trees and the neatly trimmed grass, and the sound of birds chirping created a peaceful atmosphere that was unusual in his hectic life. He had promised himself that today, he would take a few moments away from his office and his endless empire, just to breathe and clear his mind. As he strolled along the winding path, his eyes scanned the park almost absent-mindedly. That was when he noticed something unusual on a bench near a small fountain. At first, he thought it might be a passerby resting or a mother sitting with her child, but as he got closer, his pace slowed, and his heart skipped a beat. There, in the gentle morning sunlight, was his maid, the woman who had worked in his mansion for years, sitting, or rather, napping, on the bench with his baby cradled carefully in her arms. For a moment, he just stood there, frozen, staring in disbelief. How had she taken the baby outside without telling him? Why was she sleeping on a park bench with his child, exposed to the cold morning air and the bustling crowd? His mind raced with worry, fear, and a hint of anger. The baby, snug in a soft blanket, was sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of the tension that had filled the billionaire's mind. It was an odd, almost surreal sight, the smallest, most delicate human in his life resting in the arms of someone he trusted, yet in a place that seemed far too risky. He stepped closer cautiously, careful not to startle her or the baby. The maid's breathing was slow and even, showing that she was completely exhausted. Her head was slightly tilted, and the baby's tiny hand rested against her chest. The scene looked almost serene, like a painting, yet beneath that calm was a storm of questions and emotions swirling through the billionaire's mind. He had seen her take care of his baby countless times inside the safety of the mansion, but this was completely unexpected. As he stood there, he began to notice small details, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, the way she instinctively adjusted the baby in her arms when he stirred slightly, and the faint sound of the baby's soft breathing. Despite the shock, he couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of admiration and concern. She had clearly been working herself to exhaustion, and yet she still managed to hold the baby so tenderly, protecting him as if her own life depended on it. Finally, he cleared his throat softly, afraid to wake her suddenly. The maid stirred slightly, opening her eyes slowly, her face flushing with surprise and embarrassment. "Sir," she whispered quickly, sitting up straighter and clutching the baby a little tighter. I didn't mean to. Her voice trailed off, unsure how to explain herself. The billionaire felt his chest tighten as he looked at her, his mind filled with a whirlwind of emotions. He knelt slightly to get a closer look at the baby, who blinked sleepily and reached out with tiny hands, completely unaware of the tension in the air. In that moment, he realized that despite everything, the maid had taken extraordinary care of his child, keeping him safe while he himself had been oblivious, lost in his own busy world. His initial shock and fear slowly began to mix with a feeling he hadn't expected, gratitude. Still, questions raced through his mind. How long had she been out here? Why hadn't she called him or asked for permission? The park was public, there were people walking by, and it was completely unsafe. And yet, looking at the baby so calm and protected, he knew that she had acted out of love and responsibility, not carelessness. Her devotion had driven her to take risks that he himself might never have imagined. He reached out gently, touching her shoulder to get her attention. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The maid nodded quickly, still embarrassed but relieved that he wasn't angry. She explained in a hushed tone that the baby had been restless all night, and she had brought him outside for some fresh air, hoping it would help him sleep. She had stayed by his side, dozing lightly when he finally settled, never letting him out of her arms for even a second. As the billionaire listened, he felt a strange warmth spread through him. Here was someone who cared more for his child than even he had realized, someone willing to sacrifice her own rest and comfort to ensure the baby's happiness and safety. The tension in his chest slowly began to ease, replaced by a quiet sense of awe and appreciation. He realized that this unexpected discovery was more than just a shocking moment, it was a reminder of the dedication, love, and humanity that often go unnoticed in everyday life. In that quiet morning park, on that ordinary bench, He found a truth far more important than wealth or power. Care, devotion, and trust were priceless, and sometimes they were found in the most surprising places. The billionaire's mind was still reeling from what he had just seen, and yet, as he looked down at the baby in the maid's arms, a wave of panic surged through him. He had always trusted her completely, but seeing his child outside on a public bench, even in her care, made his heart race. He felt a strange mixture of anger, fear, and disbelief. How could she think it was okay to bring the baby out here alone, even if only for a few minutes? His mind was already spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if someone had tried to take the baby? What if something had happened while she was asleep? He cleared his throat softly, careful not to startle either of them. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge of tension that betrayed his inner turmoil. The maid jolted awake instantly, her eyes wide with shock, and she blinked rapidly, as if trying to shake away a lingering dream. The baby stirred slightly in her arms, rubbing his tiny eyes, still sleepy and unaware of the sudden shift in the atmosphere. "Oh, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling, I didn't mean any harm. I thought some fresh air would help him sleep." She looked down at the baby nervously, smoothing the blanket over him as if her touch alone could erase any mistakes. Her words came out in a rush, a mix of apology and explanation, and her eyes flickered with embarrassment and fear. The billionaire felt a jolt of conflicting emotions. He wanted to scold her, to express his anger, but as he studied her face, he realized how exhausted she looked. There were faint dark circles under her eyes, her shoulders slumped from weeks of tireless work, and her hands shook slightly from fatigue. She had clearly pushed herself beyond her limits, trying to care for his baby while neglecting her own rest. Anger and worry collided inside him, leaving him momentarily speechless. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay composed. "You can't just sleep outside with the baby," he said firmly, though not unkindly. "It's dangerous. Anyone could have taken him, or something could have happened." His eyes softened as he spoke, realizing that his stern words might frighten her further. She was only trying to help, trying to do what she thought was right. The maid looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know, sir. He was crying so much last night, and I couldn't calm him down. I didn't want to wake you, and I thought a little fresh air would soothe him. I didn't sleep properly myself, but I thought I could handle it." Her voice cracked at the end, a mixture of exhaustion, guilt, and fear. The billionaire's expression softened even more. He could feel the genuine care radiating from her, the quiet dedication that had kept his child safe countless times. In that moment, he realized that her actions, while risky, came from love and responsibility, not negligence. She had been so focused on the baby's well-being that she ignored her own safety and comfort, and even now, she was terrified of disappointing him. Kneeling down slightly to be at eye level, he reached out to gently touch her shoulder. "I understand," he said quietly, "but you have to let me know next time. We can find another way. You don't have to risk yourself, or him, for my sake." The word surprised even him. He had expected anger, but instead, he felt empathy and a protective instinct, not just for the baby, but for the woman who had cared for him so faithfully. For a moment, they sat together in silence. The park was quiet except for the rustling leaves and the distant laughter of children. The baby yawned and snuggled closer to the maid, unaware of the tension and emotion swirling around him. Watching this, the billionaire felt a strange sense of calm mixed with awe. Despite the shocking circumstances, he had witnessed something remarkable, an act of selfless love that few people could ever understand. Finally, he stood, holding out a hand to help her up. "Come on," he said gently, "let's get back inside. You both need rest, and I think the baby would sleep much better in a proper crib." The maid nodded, a small smile of relief crossing her face. She carefully handed the baby to him for a moment, letting him feel the warmth and innocence of the child, before standing up herself. As they walked back toward the mansion, the billionaire couldn't shake the image of that morning from his mind, the sight of her asleep on the bench, cradling his baby, and the overwhelming sense of devotion and courage it revealed. He realized that this moment, though frightening, had given him a glimpse into the true depth of care and love, a lesson he would never forget. As they walked back toward the mansion, the billionaire couldn't help but glance at the maid, noticing the exhaustion etched into her every movement. Her hands trembled slightly from fatigue, and though she tried to straighten her posture, her shoulders sagged under the weight of weeks, maybe months, of tireless work. The morning sun caught strands of her hair that had escaped her bun, making her look almost fragile. And yet, there was a strength in her, a quiet determination that spoke louder than words ever could. He couldn't help but wonder what had driven her to take the baby outside alone, risking both her safety and the child's. It was unlike her to act recklessly. She had always been careful, methodical, and deeply devoted. The answer, he realized, lay somewhere deeper, in the untold story of her life beyond the mansion walls, something he had never fully considered. As they entered the quiet, familiar halls of the house, he noticed the tiny creases around her eyes, signs of sleepless nights and constant worry. For years, she had worked tirelessly, not only caring for his child but managing countless household tasks. Yet her life outside the mansion had been a constant struggle, one he had never truly understood. She lived in a small, cramped apartment with her elderly parents and two younger siblings, juggling multiple responsibilities just to keep them fed and cared for. Every penny she earned went toward supporting her family, leaving little for herself, little for rest, little for comfort. That night, she had stayed up late comforting the baby after he had woken up crying repeatedly. She had sung lullabies in soft whispers, rocked him gently, and even tried walking him around the mansion to calm him down. Hours passed, and her eyes had grown heavy with fatigue, but she refused to wake the billionaire, not wanting to disturb him or burden him with her exhaustion. Every action she took, she did quietly, with love and dedication that went unnoticed by almost everyone but the child in her arms. The decision to take the baby outside that morning had not been made lightly. She had thought a few minutes in the fresh air would soothe him, hoping that the gentle morning breeze and the soft sounds of the park might lull him into a peaceful sleep. She had wrapped him carefully in blankets, checked the temperature, and kept a close eye on him, all the while struggling to keep her own eyes open. Her body had begged for rest, but her heart had demanded vigilance, and the baby's well-being had always come first. The billionaire, walking silently beside her, began to understand the depth of her sacrifice. This was not mere laziness or carelessness, this was devotion, a love that extended beyond obligation, beyond duty. She had given everything she had, even at the expense of her own health and comfort, simply to ensure that his child was safe and content. And in doing so, she had shown a level of courage and commitment that few could match. He thought back to all the little moments he had overlooked, the way she had stayed late on nights when he was away, the way she remembered every small detail about his child's needs, the gentle patience she displayed even when the baby was fussy or crying for hours. She had carried the weight of responsibility silently, never complaining, never seeking recognition. And now, for the first time, he saw the full picture, the sacrifices she had made, the love she had poured into every moment, and the immense pressure she had endured to protect the child he loved more than anything. It was a revelation that made his chest tighten. He realized that while he had been focused on wealth, business, and control, she had been focused on love, care, and responsibility. The contrast struck him profoundly, and a new respect for her courage and dedication began to grow inside him. He understood now why she had risked everything that morning, not recklessness, but selfless devotion. By the time they reached the mansion's front door, the billionaire felt a mixture of emotions, relief that the baby was safe, awe at the maid's dedication, and a growing sense of responsibility himself. He could no longer see her merely as an employee, she was someone who had devoted herself completely, someone whose sacrifices had gone unnoticed but whose loyalty and love were unwavering. That morning, as sunlight spilled across the entrance hall, he knew that his perspective on care, trust, and devotion had begun to change, and that the events of this simple, unexpected morning would stay with him forever. After witnessing the dedication and sacrifice of his maid, the billionaire found himself walking through the mansion corridors in a strange daze. The grandeur of his home, the polished floors, the expensive artwork, the perfectly curated furniture, suddenly felt hollow, almost meaningless compared to the quiet, selfless devotion he had just seen. His mind refused to settle. part of him wanted to scold her, to demand an explanation, to assert control as he always did, yet another part was overwhelmed with a strange, unfamiliar feeling, admiration, respect, and even guilt. He paused in the living room, leaning against the marble fireplace, and stared at the floor, his thoughts tumbling over one another. He had always prided himself on being meticulous, organized, and in control, whether it was his business empire or his household. Rules, schedules, and precision were his comfort. And yet, here was a woman who had broken every rule he had unconsciously set, sleeping on a park bench with his child, ignoring protocol, and risking everything. And she had done it out of love, not defiance. His mind wandered to the countless times he had been too busy to notice the small details, the tiny cries of discomfort from his baby, the subtle exhaustion in her eyes, the invisible labor that went into caring for his home and family. He realized that he had never fully understood her world, never considered the depth of her commitment. And suddenly, the thought struck him like a jolt: had he been too focused on his own life to truly see the people around him? He paced slowly, his expensive shoes echoing against the marble floor. Anger, which had initially surged when he saw her on the bench, now felt misplaced. He had been angry because he feared for his child's safety, yet he knew deep down that she had handled the situation with care, vigilance, and unwavering attention. His fear had clouded his judgment, making him forget that love and responsibility sometimes require risk. A part of him wrestled with the realization that his wealth and control had not given him a deeper understanding of human emotions. He had managed businesses, negotiated millions, and made decisions affecting thousands, yet he had never truly grasped the simple, profound acts of devotion that occur quietly, unnoticed, in everyday life. She had shown him something far more valuable than money or power, a capacity for empathy, sacrifice, and love that could not be bought. As he continued to walk, memories of earlier moments flashed through his mind, the late nights he spent at the office, missing bedtime stories, the countless meetings that pulled him away from family, and the times he had assumed everything at home was under control without truly checking. The image of his baby sleeping peacefully in the maid's arms that morning lingered like a vivid painting, impossible to ignore. He had been so consumed with his world of wealth and business that he had overlooked the quiet heroism happening in his own home every day. His thoughts grew more conflicted as he realized another truth: he wanted to control everything, yet this woman had shown him that some things were beyond control, that love and care cannot be forced into schedules or rules. They exist in small, selfless acts, in moments of risk, and in the courage to do what is right even when no one is watching. And she had done all of that without hesitation. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of vulnerability. His usual confidence, his commanding presence, and his wealth felt secondary compared to the quiet courage he had witnessed. He understood that being a billionaire, having power, or making decisions did not equate to wisdom or understanding. True insight, he realized, came from observing, listening, and feeling, the very qualities he had taken for granted. By the time he entered the nursery to check on his baby, the conflict in his mind had not fully settled, but something had shifted. He felt a mixture of admiration, guilt, and a growing sense of responsibility, not as a boss, not as a billionaire, but as a human being witnessing another human being's devotion. He knew he needed to acknowledge it, to show gratitude, and perhaps even rethink the way he viewed those who worked tirelessly for him. As he watched his child sleeping peacefully, he felt a promise forming quietly in his mind, a promise to be more present, more understanding, and more compassionate. The inner conflict was far from resolved, but for the first time, he understood that some lessons could only be learned through humility, reflection, and witnessing the courage and love of others. And he knew that morning in the park would stay with him forever, a moment that had changed his heart in ways money and power never could. The morning had started like any other, yet by now, the billionaire felt as if the world had shifted beneath his feet. The walk to the nursery, the sight of his baby sleeping peacefully, and the quiet, devoted presence of his maid had already stirred emotions he didn't expect: admiration, guilt, and a strange sense of vulnerability. But what happened next was something he could never have predicted. As the maid placed the baby gently in his crib, she reached into her pocket to straighten her apron, and a small piece of paper slipped from her hand, fluttering to the floor. The billionaire's sharp eyes caught it instantly. It was unusual for her to carry notes, and curiosity pulled him closer. He picked it up carefully, unfolding the crumpled piece of paper. The note was written in neat, careful handwriting. At first, he thought it might be a shopping list or a reminder, but as he read the words, his breath caught in his throat. It was a personal message, not meant for him, yet he had discovered it by chance. She had written about her family's struggles, about her parents' illnesses, her younger siblings' education, and the small victories and sacrifices she had made to survive while still caring for his household and his child. Every word radiated honesty, vulnerability, and a deep sense of responsibility. The billionaire's heart pounded as he read lines describing sleepless nights, skipped meals, and endless worry, all while performing her duties flawlessly. She had hidden her struggles behind a calm exterior, presenting only dedication and efficiency to the world, but this note revealed the quiet battles she fought every single day. It was a testament to her courage, and it was impossible for him not to feel both humbled and astonished. He looked up to see her standing nearby, adjusting the baby's blanket, unaware that he had read her private words. The realization struck him like lightning. This woman, who had risked so much that morning and countless times before, had endured hardships in silence, never once asking for help or recognition. She had carried a weight that he, with all his wealth and power, could barely imagine. For a moment, he didn't speak. The room felt heavy with the unspoken truth, and he sensed the significance of this revelation. She had risked her safety to calm the baby that morning, not out of recklessness, but out of devotion and necessity. Every sacrifice she had made was a thread in the invisible tapestry that held his home and family together, and he had only just glimpsed it. The billionaire felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Shock, humility, and a deep, almost painful admiration for her resilience coursed through him. He realized that her quiet dedication had not been just about duty or employment, it had been an expression of love, courage, and selflessness that few people could understand. And the irony was striking. The very act that had alarmed him earlier, the maid napping on a park bench with his baby, was now illuminated in a new light. It was not carelessness, it was heroism. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before speaking. I had no idea, he said softly, not referring to the note aloud but to the life it represented. His voice was calm, but the weight of what he had learned pressed on him. He realized how little he had truly known about the person who had been such a vital part of his life for years. He had assumed loyalty and efficiency, but the depth of her sacrifice, her struggles, and her courage were far beyond anything he had imagined. The maid glanced up, sensing his gaze but not the truth he now held in his mind. She smiled faintly, exhaustion evident, yet still carrying herself with quiet dignity. The billionaire suddenly understood that words alone could never express his gratitude, and that some lessons, about loyalty, sacrifice, and love, could only be learned through observation, patience, and empathy. This unexpected twist, the discovery of her personal struggles through a simple note, transformed everything. It shifted his perspective on power, authority, and the meaning of care. He realized that true wealth was not measured in money or status, but in the human capacity for love, devotion, and courage. And she had shown him more of that in one morning than he had seen in a lifetime of business deals and achievements. For the first time, he felt compelled not to command or instruct, but to understand, to protect, and to acknowledge the invisible battles of the people around him. The note had opened a door he never knew existed, a door to empathy, gratitude, and a deeper appreciation for the human spirit. And as he stood there, holding the fragile paper in his hand, he knew that his life, and his understanding of loyalty, love, and sacrifice, would never be the same again. The room was quiet except for the soft, rhythmic breathing of the baby nestled in the crib. The billionaire still held the small, crumpled note in his hand, feeling its weight far heavier than any piece of paper had a right to be. Every word he had read seemed to echo in his mind, stirring emotions he had long buried under schedules, meetings, and endless obligations. Anger and worry from earlier that morning had faded, replaced by something far more complex, admiration, humility, and a profound sense of gratitude. He glanced at the maid, who stood by the crib, adjusting the blanket around the baby's tiny shoulders. She looked exhausted, yet her eyes held a quiet determination that had always impressed him. But now, knowing the struggles she had faced in silence, he saw her in a completely new light. She was no longer just an employee. She was a guardian, a protector, and a hero in ways he had never understood until this morning. His heart tightened as he realized the depth of her devotion. Every sleepless night she had endured, every skipped meal, every worry about her own family while caring for his child, it all reflected a love that transcended obligation. He felt a pang of guilt, recognizing that he had never truly seen her sacrifices. He had assumed efficiency and loyalty, but he had never paused to appreciate the courage, the patience, and the love behind her actions. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel, not just to think. A wave of empathy washed over him, leaving him momentarily speechless. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to acknowledge the silent battles she fought every day, but words seemed inadequate. How could he possibly express the gratitude and respect he felt? How could he convey the understanding he had gained in a single morning? The maid looked up, catching his gaze. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and he saw something in her expression, a mixture of apprehension, humility, and relief. She had feared his anger, feared that her devotion had been misunderstood or dismissed. Yet in that instant, he realized that his perception of her had shifted completely. He wasn't angry anymore. He was deeply moved, almost overwhelmed by the realization of how much she had given, not for recognition, but out of genuine care. He walked slowly toward her, careful not to startle her. I had no idea, he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. I knew you worked hard, but I didn't realize everything you've been carrying all this time. He paused, searching for words that could bridge the gap between admiration and gratitude. You've sacrificed so much, and yet you've never asked for anything in return. Not money, not recognition, just to care, to protect, to love. The maid's eyes glistened, and she lowered her gaze, a small, nervous smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I wanted him to be safe, sir, she murmured softly. That's all I've ever wanted. Her voice trembled, revealing the depth of her honesty and vulnerability. The billionaire felt a lump form in his throat. In that moment, he realized that love and care could not be measured in wealth, status, or power. True devotion, he understood now, was quiet, selfless, and often invisible. And she had embodied it completely, risking herself for the happiness and safety of his child, while facing her own struggles in silence. A slow warmth spread through him, replacing the tight anxiety that had gripped him earlier. He felt connected to her in a way he never had before, not as an employer to an employee, but as one human being to another. He understood the courage it took to act selflessly, the patience it took to endure exhaustion without complaint, and the resilience it took to balance personal hardship with unwavering devotion. For the first time that day, he smiled, not the polite, controlled smile he usually wore in business meetings, but a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. The room seemed brighter, the air warmer, as if the acknowledgement of her sacrifices had lifted an invisible weight. The emotions he had felt, the worry, the fear, the admiration, and the humility, blended into a deep appreciation that words could hardly capture. As he watched her stand quietly by the crib, a sense of respect and trust settled over him. He knew, without a doubt, that her love for the child was limitless, and that her courage and devotion would guide her every decision. And in that understanding, he realized that this moment, this unfolding of hidden truths and silent sacrifices, was a turning point. His perspective on loyalty, love, and human connection had shifted forever, and he knew that the events of this morning would remain etched in his heart for the rest of his life. The billionaire stood quietly in the nursery, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the sleeping baby. He watched the maid adjust the blanket around the child's tiny shoulders, her movements gentle and careful, yet precise from years of experience. He realized that what had begun as shock and confusion that morning had grown into something far deeper, understanding, respect, and a profound sense of responsibility toward her. For the first time, he truly saw her, not just as his employee, not just as the caretaker of his child, but as a person with her own struggles, sacrifices, and quiet courage. He thought about the note, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices she had made for her family, and the bravery it had taken to care for his child while juggling her own hardships. His heart ached at the thought of all she had endured in silence, and he knew that mere words would never be enough to express the gratitude he felt. He took a slow step closer, finally speaking in a tone softer than she had ever heard from him. "I want to help," he said simply, yet the weight of the words carried immense meaning. She looked up at him, startled, unsure what he meant. "I know you've been carrying so much on your shoulders, supporting your family, caring for my child, and sacrificing your rest and comfort. I can't change the past, but I want to support you. I want to make sure your family is safe, and that you don't have to struggle alone anymore." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She had expected scolding, criticism, or perhaps reprimand, but not this: compassion, understanding, and an offer of help from the very person she had feared would be angry. The billionaire extended his hand, not as a boss commanding, but as a human being reaching out, acknowledging her courage and sacrifices. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly, embarrassed by the sudden vulnerability she felt. "Sir. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but there was relief there too, a relief she hadn't felt in years. She had feared judgment, rejection, or indifference, but instead, she was met with empathy and generosity that left her momentarily speechless. The billionaire smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that your loyalty, love, and dedication are valued more than anything. I want to help your family, and I want to make sure you're taken care of, so you can continue your work without carrying all this alone." He paused, glancing at the baby, who stirred and reached out his tiny hand instinctively. The sight of the child trusting both of them, completely unaware of the tension and emotions around him, made the billionaire feel a surge of hope and clarity. From that moment, a new bond formed between them, not one defined by employer and employee, but by trust, respect, and understanding. She realized that her efforts had not gone unnoticed, and he realized that power and wealth meant nothing without empathy and human connection. The tension and fear of that morning dissolved, replaced by mutual recognition of courage, sacrifice, and love. He arranged for her family to be supported financially, quietly and respectfully, without causing embarrassment or shame. He ensured that her work schedule allowed for rest and care, understanding now that her health and well-being were just as important as the child's safety. It was a small but significant shift, one that marked a turning point not just in their professional relationship, but in how he viewed loyalty, love, and responsibility. As the day went on, he found himself observing her in a new way, the careful way she cleaned, the gentle tone she used with the baby, the quiet determination in every step she took. Every action, he realized, had been fueled by love and courage, not obligation. And he felt a deep gratitude, not just for the care she had given his child, but for the lessons she had unknowingly taught him about selflessness, devotion, and compassion. By evening, the atmosphere in the house had shifted. There was a sense of peace, trust, and mutual respect that hadn't existed before. The events of the morning, once filled with fear and shock, had led to understanding and connection. And in that quiet resolution, both the billionaire and the maid understood something profound, that true loyalty and love are measured not in money or power, but in sacrifice, courage, and the willingness to care for someone beyond oneself. For the first time in a long while, the billionaire felt a calm certainty. He knew that this incident had changed his perspective forever and that their bond, forged through trust, respect, and compassion, would guide them both in the days to come. The evening settled over the mansion like a soft, golden blanket, and the house, usually filled with the hum of busy activity, felt calm and peaceful. The baby was finally asleep, tucked securely in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling in the rhythm of innocence and trust. The billionaire sat quietly in the study, reflecting on the day's events, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to truly pause. The morning's shock, the note, the maid's unwavering dedication, all of it had left an indelible mark on him. He thought back to the moment he had seen her asleep on the park bench, cradling his child. At first, he had felt fear and anger, but now he understood that what he had witnessed was far more than carelessness. It was courage, devotion, and selfless love wrapped in a simple act. The realization humbled him. In all his wealth, power, and influence, he had never encountered a form of strength like hers, a quiet, persistent, human strength that couldn't be measured or bought. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, letting the emotions wash over him. He realized that the world he had built for himself, full of skyscrapers, boardrooms, and contracts, was nothing compared to the lessons he had learned today. Money could protect, provide, and impress, but it could never teach him the depth of sacrifice, loyalty, and love. Those lessons came from watching another human being care without expectation, struggle in silence, and protect without hesitation. And in that realization, he felt a change stir within himself, subtle yet undeniable. He thought about the maid, standing quietly in the nursery just hours ago, her hands tenderly adjusting the baby's blanket, her eyes tired yet full of determination. She had carried her burdens with dignity, faced her fears alone, and still found the energy to care for his most precious possession. He now saw her as more than a caretaker, she was a teacher of humility and compassion. Her courage had shown him what it truly meant to care for someone without seeking reward, recognition, or credit. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, and the maid entered quietly, as she always did, though now the air between them was different, less formal, more respectful, more human. She hesitated, then spoke softly, "Sir, is everything all right?" The billionaire looked up, and for the first time, he saw her not just as a member of his staff, but as a person whose life had intersected with his in a way that changed him forever. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight of sincerity. "About everything today. About what I saw, about your sacrifices, and everything you do for this child, for my family, for yourself. I realize now that true care, true loyalty, and true courage can't be bought. They have to come from the heart. And you've shown me what that means."